Hey there, HorseCenter fans. Matt and I are back with another exciting edition of the show. Matt, we are jumping into the Kentucky Derby full force this week.
It sure is. This is our first of three Kentucky Derby shows to get you fans ready for the first Saturday in September.
It looks like the field is pretty well set. Find out who we like best of the long shots and also our full field pace projection. Watch it all right now here on HorseCenter. Welcome to another edition of HorseCenter, everyone. I am Brian Zipsy, and as always, I have the extra special pleasure of being joined by Kentucky Derby Matt Schiffman. How are you today, Matt?
I am good, Kentucky-based Brian Zipsy. Here we go with our Kentucky Derby coverage on HorseCenter. The first of four shows for the Run for the Roses.
Yeah, you don't want to miss any of these, folks. It's Kentucky Derby time, Matt. We're only 9 days away as we film this edition of HorseCenter on Thursday morning. We're projecting right now a field of 18 lining up in that brand new starting gate there at Churchill Downs 9 days from today. There's been some protests in Louisville, but we expect the race will go on as planned. Sans fans, but will go on as planned 9 days from now. And Matt and I want to break down the race and analyze the race as much as possible to help all you out there cash some good tickets on the Kentucky Derby. We're going to start with our favorite long shots. Now, Matt, the favorites look strong. The favorite and the favorites look strong in this edition of the Kentucky Derby, the 2020 edition of the Kentucky Derby. Horses like Tis the Law and then maybe Art Collector, Honor AP, they look like horses likely to run a good race. These long shots might not necessarily win, but we see it year after year where the long shots get into the exotics and spice up the exotics. Almost every year you have some long shots get in there. Last year, one got put up for the win, in fact, Matt. So it's important that we identify the right long shots that are eligible to run a big race next Saturday. And I want to start with you. And you know this horse, NY Traffic, New York Traffic, pretty well, Matt.
Yeah, that's for sure, Brian. I saw New York Traffic when I was at Monmouth Park for the Haskell. I saw New York Traffic almost upset Authentic, just losing by a nose at the wire. New York Traffic has been nothing but consistent, battling, tenacious in his last three races, finishing second in big Derby preps. And probably the most important part of why I like New York Traffic as a long shot is that I'm fairly confident that he's going to get the 1.25 mile distance for the Kentucky Derby.
That's right, Matt. I think you used a lot of great adjectives there, tenacious being one that I especially like when we describe this New York bred son of cross traffic. I remember years ago when the Pittsburgh Steelers and the Houston Oilers were the AFC Titans back in the day, Matt. I'm aging myself a little bit, but Bum Phillips, after the Steelers knocked them out of the playoffs a year or two, said, we've been knocking on the door, now we're going to kick it in. And maybe that's where NY Traffic is right now after finishing second in the Louisiana Derby, second in the Matt Winn, second in the Haskell. I don't know if he's going to win, but I really do expect another good race. If we look at that Haskell, it's visually impressive the way he's gaining on Authentic. Now, folks, this is not a case of New York Traffic kicking it into a big sprint to the wire. It was a lot of Authentic starting to slow down in the final eighth of a mile in the Haskell. But again, what it shows is that after prompting the pace, after chasing for the first mile, NY Traffic was tenacious enough and finishing well enough to really be gaining. Jockey Paco Lopez thought he had nailed Authentic as they hit the wire and was surprised that he was not the winner of the Haskell. 1.25 miles with that ability to stay close and the way he wants to finish off races and keeps running to the wire. I think he's a good long shot to get into the exotics, Matt. And we already know he likes the track. He ran a very good race in the Matt Winn.
Yeah, that's for sure, Brian. And you mentioned in the Haskell he was gaining on Authentic, who was backing up a little bit. Well, that's going to be happening in the Kentucky Derby. In this field of 18, there are going to be a lot of horses backing up, and New York Traffic is going to be close enough that he doesn't have to do that much except keep on running. And in our definition of these long shots, Brian and I were thinking about horses that are probably going to be at least 15-1 when they go in the gate.
Yeah, well, in the last future wager, which was after that Haskell, Matt, he was over 30-1. There's a few less horses in the Derby, but I'm expecting 20-1 or more on New York Traffic, and that looks awfully good when you think Authentic probably will be the fourth choice, closer to 10-1. That's the horse he just about nailed in the wire in the 9 furlong Haskell. Now we get to the 10 furlong Kentucky Derby. I also like the fact that after setting the pace early on in the season in the Risen Star, he's kind of laid off the pace a little bit, and I think that's a good scenario for him going to the Kentucky Derby. Who else, Matt? Who else are our top long shots? Who's number 2 on our list?
We've got Caracaro also on our long shot list, and Caracaro is a little bit more lightly raced than New York Traffic, but is a horse that seems to be coming into his own in this new Kentucky Derby year, where the 3-year-olds are going to be about 4 months older than they usually are, and this scenario has certainly benefited Caracaro, who has shown up in New York for trainer Gustavo Delgado and finished second in the Peter Pan, and then a very noteworthy second in the Travers, going the Derby distance of 1.25 miles.
Right on, Matt. That 1.25 miles, I think, even though we're talking about a Derby 4 months later than it is, usually there still aren't a lot of horses that have been the 1.25 mile distance, and Caracaro checks that box. Listen, early on this year, very early on this year, Caracaro was one of those horses we identified as a horse who looked like a talented 3-year-old who was going to make some noise on the Kentucky Derby trail. He missed some time. He was away for 6 months. But I really like what he did when he came back to Saratoga. I thought he very well may have been best in the Peter Pan, where the Winter Country Grammar really had that rail open up for him. Caracaro had to go a little wide. That was after a long layoff, and he had never been the distance before. Very game second in the Peter Pan, when behind Country Grammar by, I guess, about a neck or a half length. And then he comes back in the Travers. And, on the negative, Tis the Law just won for fun. He was much the best. He was the king of the Travers. There's no denying that Caracaro was a well-beaten second. But it's a horse who, again, that was only his 4th lifetime race, only his 2nd race off the layup, going 10 furlongs at Saratoga. And he was clearly second best in there. So I think it was a pretty big performance, despite the fact that he got whomped by the favorite. A horse who certainly, having said everything I just said, Matt, who could move a little bit forward on the first Saturday in September.
Yeah, that's for sure. Checking a lot of boxes that I want to see in the Kentucky Derby on a horse that I'm thinking of putting my money down, and that big box of getting the 10 furlong distance, and appears to be, like you said, and I've felt this way going into the Travers, that Caracaro is a horse that appears to have room to improve, and I believe that can happen again.
Exactly. And again, folks, we're talking maybe with these long shots more about running 2nd, 3rd, or 4th than winning. But I think NY Traffic and Caracaro, more than any of the other long shots, might have the ability to run a really huge race. Now, when we get down to our other 2 long shots that we're going to identify, Matt, I'm a little bit more in the thought, well, they're the ones that very well, as we see so often in the 10 furlong Kentucky Derby, are going to be passing horses who really didn't want to run 10 furlongs. And these horses often rally up into the trifecta and the superfecta. Let's start with a horse I think will be pretty long, and that's Major Fed.
Yeah, Major Fed is going to be a legitimate long shot. You mentioned with New York Traffic, maybe he'll be 20-1. Well, this one could be up there pushing 40 to 50-1. It's a horse that flashed some talent on the original Kentucky Derby trail in Louisiana at the fairgrounds, with a 2nd in the Risen Star and a 4th in the Louisiana Derby. And I point out those races because this year at the fairgrounds, they lengthened the distance of their Kentucky Derby preps. The Risen Star was 1.1 miles. The Louisiana Derby was 1 mile and 3/16. So again, the chance that this one is going to be less tired, will certainly have a chance to be passing tired horses, and will have some run left in him down the stretch at Churchill Downs. Most recently was second in the Indiana Derby, so maybe getting back to some of that good form that he flashed in the springtime.
Right, and if you look 2 starts back, he threw in kind of a clunker, and I think that's going to help with those 40-1 or so odds in here. But you look at all the other races and the graded stakes races he's run, and he has been a consistent rallier. I'll add that in Louisiana, he really didn't have great trips. I'm a little concerned in the Indiana Derby that the winner, Shared Sense, was the push button rallier on the turn. Major Fed came up to him, and it looked like it might be those two to the wire, but Shared Sense kind of took off from him again, and then Major Fed had more work to do. It's tough to go wide at that track at Indiana Grand, and Major Fed did it, and then Major Fed was running really well down the stretch of the Indiana Derby to be second behind Shared Sense, who's not in this year's Kentucky Derby. Any of those races that we mentioned, the Louisiana Derby, Mile 3/16, the Indiana Derby, the Risen Star, Major Fed runs that race again, maybe with a little better luck. He's the one that could be very well picking up in a spot in the exotics. Major Fed, if you look at the win odds at 40-1, maybe he deserves to be 40-1, but Matt and I are saying he doesn't deserve to be 40-1 to run third or to run fourth. Maybe for that position, he's only 15-1 or 12-1, even if he can really get that rally going. But he'll be 40-1 to close out those exotics. So that's a nice bomb that Matt and I both think is one of the ones that could rally up into the picture. I think an even more likely horse to rally up into the picture, Matt, but it's going to be a little lower, is Max Player. Max Player probably will be more in the 20-25-1 range, but still 20-25-1 range in the exotics is something nice, and Max Player has proven he can hit the board in these big races.
Yeah, big races, Brian, that you mentioned. Third in the Travers, third in the Belmont Stakes while training in New York for Linda Rice. Since then, he's been transferred to the barn of Steve Asmussen so that he can get accustomed to and train at Churchill Downs. That's got to be a plus to get the last few weeks or so of acclimation to the track under the Twin Spires. Max Player has shown the ability to close in those races, and like we've said, all important, has shown that he is likely to get the 10 furlong distance after he ran third in the Travers.
Yeah, all good points, Matt. And people are still saying that Tiz the Law hasn't beaten much to get to this point as the clear Kentucky Derby favorite. Obviously, Matt and I think he has beaten some decent horses here in horses like Caro, Max Player, Dr. Post. So that's maybe a little bit more on the lineup for the favorite. But Max Player's rallied for third in both the Belmont and the Travers. He is working well at Churchill Downs since he's arrived to our new stable. Like it or not, the shift to trainer Steve Asmussen, it is something that's related specifically to run a good race in the Kentucky Derby, and it just might work. Mile and a quarter, we know he can get the distance. He's well beaten by Tiz the Law like Caro last time, but mile and a quarter with a lot of tiring horses, a lot of horses who want to be on or near the early lead. It looks to me like Max Player at, say, 25-1 is a pretty good bet to pass a lot of them. Whether that means he's third or fourth or fifth or sixth at the finish, we'll see. But a horse I think you need to use in the exotics. All right, Matt, that's our 4 top long shots for the Kentucky Derby as we're 9 days out. I would say New York Traffic, a good 20-1. Caro, similar, maybe even higher. Max Player, similar, probably even higher. And then Major Fed is the bomb of the bunch. My favorite of the 4, honestly, is New York Traffic. How about you?
I can't blame you on liking New York Traffic. Maybe I would lean a little bit more towards Caro.
Nice. Okay. But we are pretty well in agreement, folks, and that's a little unusual. We're pretty well in agreement on our top long shots for this year's Kentucky Derby. Okay, so those are the horses we want to bet with odds underneath some of the horses or even on top of some of the big names in here, Matt. But let's now look a little bit how this race is going to be run, because I think that's hugely important as you're handicapping the Kentucky Derby. Your opinions may be a little different than ours, but when we are looking to handicap this race, we have to kind of break down how the race will be run, what kind of pace it's going to be, and that helps us make decisions with our gambling dollar. Matt, what we did this year, as usual, is we broke down the field. Again, we're projecting 18, although we did include 19 on this list. Rushy is kind of 50-50 right now, or maybe 30-70 to run in the Derby. He's more likely for the Pat Day Mile out of the Mike McCarthy Bond. But we put him on the list just because he still is a possibility. It looks like Dr. Post is not going to run in the Kentucky Derby, so you won't find his name on this list. Now, we have 4 lists. We're going to start with the speed. And again, there are some choices we made here. It's our opinion, but this is who we put on the list of speed. There's only 3 names here. And Matt, I think the most likely horse to be out there early is Authentic.
Yeah, that's for sure. The Bob Baffert runner has, if you look at his past performances, he has gone to the lead. He has wanted to get out in front in all of his races, and when he gets out in front, he's done pretty well. Remembering with his 4 wins and 5 starts, only a defeat to Honor AP amongst those races. I think coming out of the gate, they're going to want to get as close to the lead as possible.
Right. Yeah, Authentic, very likely to be first, or at least right off first, as they pass the grandstand for the first time into the first turn. And Authentic should set a pretty decent pace. As I handicap this race, Matt, more and more, I just see so many horses that want to be close to the lead, where I think no one's going to get away with a 112, 113 in here. I think we're going to see a legitimate pace in the Kentucky Derby. Maybe not super fast, but I think a legitimate pace with Authentic, the most likely early leader. Now, 2 other horses we put on the speed list, we could have called horses that want to be just off the lead, but for reasons here, I think both of them had to be in our category of speed. The first one is Art Collector, who we think will be the second choice. And he ran pretty fast in the Ellis Park Derby. He ran 110 and change out there. He went right to the lead. In the Bluegrass, where they've set a very fast pace, Chivalry and Swiss Skydiver, Art Collector was right there and quickly made his move on the turn. But I also think that the specter of 'Tis the Law, it makes me think that Art Collector cannot really fall too far off this lead, because I don't think they want to try to rally by 'Tis the Law. I think Art Collector, they believe their best chance is to be ahead of 'Tis the Law the entire race. So I think he's going to be right out there.
Yeah, I agree with that. And you have to keep in mind with this field size, even if it's not 20, even if it's 18, in order to be able to achieve the kind of position that horses that we've mentioned thus far, like Authentic, like Art Collector, in order for them to get to that spot and get an advantage over, we're talking about a formidable favorite in 'Tis the Law, they're going to have to go fast, Brian, in the beginning. There's 18 horses. You can't expect to go 23 or 23 and change and get to that spot in the beginning of the race. I guess they hope that they're going to have to go fast, get out there, and then maybe hope that they'll be able to slow things down a little bit and have a chance to get to 10 furlongs.
Yeah, that's a great point, Matt. I think you hit the nail on the head, and we saw it a couple years with the Triple Crown, a couple years ago with the Triple Crown winner Justify, where he had to run a very fast first quarter in the Kentucky Derby before being able to slow it down just a little bit on the lead. But you're right. These horses will be jockeying for early position. There is more room with the starting gate. The stalls are a little wider. There's less of a run into the first turn the way the gate is now, with only 1 starting gate for the Kentucky Derby. But still, there's a lot of horses trying to jockey for good position, close position early. So that means that first quarter mile especially should be honest. Whether they slow down a little bit or a lot of bit after that, we'll wait and see. But I really do think it'll be an honest pace. And another reason I think it'll be an honest pace, Matt, is King Guillermo, the Tampa Bay Derby winner, the Arkansas Derby second. He's working really well here at Churchill Downs. He's throwing in some fast workouts. He's also very fresh. And folks who might not know racing as well as everybody out there, Horses that haven't run in a while often will show more speed. You look at King Guillermo's past performances, you might say, well, he wants to sit third or something, but he has wired races before. He's been very close to fast paces before. He's very fresh. He's working fast, big field. I look for King Guillermo to be right there early.
Yeah, I think those recent indicators that he's going to be keen in the Kentucky Derby, and you know, I think that's a play that the connections of this horse are going to have to try if he's going to have a chance.
Yeah, I think last time in the Arkansas Derby, they purposely wanted to lay off Nadal just a little bit and see if they could rally at him. It worked for a second, but he wasn't very close to Nadal. So I think they let him run a little bit more, and I think we're seeing that in the morning works. The next list, Matt, as Brett switches over to the Stalkers list, is a big list, and maybe we could have even included more. There's a few in here that we could have put on the speed list, but I'm expecting these horses probably to be behind the top three early. Having said that, Matt, especially last time in the Travers, you look at Tiz the Law's recent form. He breaks well, and then he never falls too far behind. In the Travers, he was pretty darn close the whole way.
Yeah, and in recent history, in the Derby, when it has been on the first Saturday in May, this is the pace group from which many of the recent Kentucky Derby winners have been classified. So it's important to keep that in mind. And I don't know, with the Derby going in September this year, all of the tendencies that happened when the Derby was in May. I don't know if we can count on those happening, but certainly Tiz the Law, the favorite, is the leader of the Stalkers. And you look at his past performances, each of the running lines, they're almost identical, getting off to a third or fourth place position early on, and just hanging nicely there and making his move. And there are several others in this group who are going to be trying to make that coveted move in the Kentucky Derby.
Right, and Tiz the Law has shown a really good burst of speed late in the turn, early in the stretch of late. So I think it makes sense in this big field with all these horses who want to be on or near the lead that Tiz the Law might be a little bit farther than, say, a race like the Travers where he was super close early. But still, they don't want to get shuffled back too far. Manny Franco doesn't want to find himself in 9th, 10th position early, nor does he want to find himself in the middle of a traffic jam early. So I think he's going to be hustled a little bit to be relatively close. New York traffic is always close, and I think he's become a better horse since they took him just off the lead, like I've said in his last 3 efforts, where he's been able to stalk, be right there, and then be tenacious. So I think that's the plan with him as well. Also on this list, Matt, we have 1,000 Words who wired the Shared Belief over Honor AP in his last race. But he seems like a horse who can do a lot of different things, who has enough early pace to be close early, but he can be a little farther back if need be.
Yeah, and 1,000 Words is also from the barn of Bob Baffert, and I don't think Baffert is going to want both of his horses in 1,000 Words and Authentic knocking heads right out there in the front, and 1,000 Words is far more likely to be successful sitting off the pace a little bit.
Right. And I think that's true of Caro early on in those maiden races that he ran early in the year. He did show a little bit more speed than maybe lately. In the Peter Pan and the Travers, he was able to relax a little bit early and then make his move on the turn. But in both of those races, he wasn't too far back. I would suspect a similar trip. We may have even been, looking at the Travers, been able to put Caro in the mid-pack grouping, but he has enough early speed where I think he is similar to a lot of these other horses in not wanting to fall too far off the early lead. Next on the list, Matt, I think is a wild card, and that's the Canadian, the undefeated Canadian. He's only had 2 races, very, very impressive. On turf in his debut, he ran 108 on the way to a very fast 7 furlongs. So Cheryl Spate has some real speed. We don't know for sure about dirt, although he's working up a storm on dirt. We don't know if he's going to be able to stick around in only his 3rd lifetime race at a 1.25 miles with so many good horses in here. But on the other hand, he looks to have a lot of talent, and he does have speed. So my guess is they don't want him too far off the early lead as well.
Yeah, it would seem that way, and I agree with your description of Cheryl Spite as a wild card in there, as one with only 2 races and never having run on the dirt and mile and a quarter distance, chipping down from Canada. Who knows what this horse is going to do? But yeah, I think it's fair to say that sending out on the front with the horses that we mentioned isn't going to be a good idea.
Yeah, and he could be the horse that is 8th early in the backstretch and makes a nice move, makes a sharp move, starts to show how talented he is at some point in the backstretch to get really in the picture. Whether that's going to translate the last quarter mile of the Kentucky Derby, I really have no idea. I think the odds are against him with his experience, but I wouldn't be at all surprised if Cheryl Spade is one of those horses who puts his name right there as they head into that far turn in the Derby. And the final horse we have on this list, Matt, actually wired the Breeders' Cup Juvenile. It's easy to forget that he wired the Breeders' Cup Juvenile. This year, Storm the Court has never been on the lead in any of his races that he hasn't necessarily run poorly. He's not won any of them. He's not wired any of them, but he's shown enough early speed where you figure he would be one of the ones relatively close to the lead early.
Yeah, and I agree with that. I think this is the position that he's been in as a stalker in his races this year. And like you said, he hasn't won since that Breeders' Cup, but he hasn't been badly embarrassed in any of these races. He looks like a horse that's going to get the distance, gets a rider change to Kentucky-based jockey Julian Leparoux, which I think is a good fit for this horse.
Maybe. Leparoux is known as a patient rider, and maybe that can help Storm the Court get 10 furlongs. Maybe he's a horse like we've been talking about New York Traffic that can be 3rd or 4th early and 3rd or 4th late if he really does hold for the full 10 furlongs. But just given his form this year, it's tough to get super excited about the juvenile champion. Now, the next list is we called mid-pack, Matt, and in the Derby with all these horses, mid-pack actually means you're in the second 9, not the first 9 early, although some of these could certainly be closer than 10th or 11th or 12th. Caro, maybe we could have moved back a little bit. Honore P, maybe we could have put him in the stalker list, but I think Honore P's strength is going to be finishing, being in touch, whether that means he's 9th or 10th early and 6, 7 lengths off the lead, but being close enough where he can be in touch to make a move on the turn and then finish stronger than anybody, because I think he really is a mile and a quarter horse. So I do think Honore P will find himself somewhere in mid-pack, Matt. And you know I like this one. I like this one more than you do.
Yeah, oh, that's for sure, Brian. And I think it's worth noting that jockey Mike Smith, who's won the Kentucky Derby twice before, opted to stay on Honore P and not ride a horse like Authentic, who he won the Haskell with. Of course, Mike Smith won his first Kentucky Derby with trainer John Sheriffs on Giacomo back in the day, and I think Smith is going to be most concerned in the early going in the Derby with Honor P about getting him in a comfortable position, making sure that he's clear so that he can make his late closing move that many people, including yourself, Brian, expect to be a big closing move, as opposed to being worried about being real close to the early pace.
Right. And I do expect a relatively aggressive ride from Mike Smith, who's been getting more out of Honore P in the mornings. Yeah, it was never any doubt, at least on my perspective, that Mike Smith would pick Honore P over Authentic. I think you saw that even in the San Felipe. He got off the horse and said how much this horse is going to love 10 furlongs. And in the Santa Anita Derby, he ran right by Authentic. So it was never a question, despite getting upset last time in a race that wasn't really his cup of tea, if you will. I think he's going to be ready for 10 furlongs. I don't want him 4th at the 8th pole. I don't want him 6th at the 8th pole, though. I don't see him as a horse who's going to make that late rush and get into the picture. I want him to make his move on the turn, but I want him a little bit off that pace where he can make a nice move on the turn, get into position when they straighten out, be third or fourth when they straighten out, and then just show us all how much he likes 10 furlongs. I think that's the race that can win it for Honor AP. The other horses, frankly, Matt, on this mid-pack list, I'm very dubious of their ability to get 10 furlongs and to beat horses, so many good horses like that. We'll start with attachment rate. A lot of people liked his second place in the Ellis Park Derby. For me, it was another, well, it's a decent race like he's run so many before, but he was no match for Art Collector.
Yeah, I agree with that, Brian. And I don't even know if we're 100% sure yet if attachment rate is going to be in the Derby. I think Dale Romans is still considering the Pat Day Mile a little bit out there. But either way, that second in the Ellis Park Derby, along with the rest of his past performances, doesn't fill me in confidence that he can get the distance and that he's going to have enough of a closing move to be a contender.
Yeah, and I would say much the same about the next two, maybe even more so, Necker Island and Rushy, if Rushy's in the field. I think attachment rate is maybe a little bit more likely to run a good Derby than either one of them at 10 furlongs. And I don't think any of the three really have the speed to be in the top half a dozen or so early. So that's why they're in the mid-pack grouping. The other horse on the list, Finnick the Fierce, sometimes he's a little closer to the pace. Sometimes he's well off the pace. I guess he broke poorly last time. Some people like him as a bomb to be finishing, and he has finished some races pretty well. I think he's got enough speed to be ahead of the late runners early, but not enough consistently good races for me to be too excited about him. But on the other hand, he's a horse who maybe could be 10th or 12th early and then actually pass a bunch of tired horses and finish in the top 5 at the end at 50 to 1. But I don't know if that's enough of a endorsement to put him on my tickets.
Yeah, I feel the same way about Finnick. There's a lot of other horses that I feel more strongly about.
Okay, so that's the mid-pack, which I think is generally a pretty weak group. We don't think any of them will be in the top 5 or 6 early, and maybe some of them can get the mile and a quarter distance, other than, of course, Honor AP, who I do really like quite a bit in this year's Kentucky Derby. The last on our grouping, Matt, is the late runners. I feel pretty confident about putting all 5 of these horses into the late runners group. I like some more than others. Folks, you'll know from our long shot list. Max Player, we talked about quite a bit. I don't think he's going to be last early. I think he's got a little bit more early speed than some. But Max Player definitely wants to be in the last quarter of this field, the last quarter of the horses in this field, and then make his move on the turn and see where he can go. Enforceable, though, is a horse we haven't talked about, Matt. One of the reasons he's not one of my favorite long shots, I think he's got a shot, but one of the reasons I don't like him as much as a few others is I just don't see any speed, and I don't see any way that he's not going to get a really wide kind of belated trip here in the Kentucky Derby.
Yeah, I agree with that, Brian. And on top of it, you can add that he's got a rookie rider in Adam Basheza up on him, and that can't be an encouraging factor. Also, although rookie riders have won the Kentucky Derby in the past, I agree with what you said. I don't think there's going to be enough pace, and Enforceable is the kind of horse that needs a hot pace to be able to be in contention.
Yeah, and having said that, I think he's a better horse than a number of horses we've already talked about. He's a nice horse. He's a consistent rallier. I just don't see him as the nimble type of horse who can work his way through traffic. I think he's going to be outside, and I think it's going to be a late, belated run for Enforceable. Having said that, he is working pretty well at Churchill Downs. The next horse on our late runners list, Matt, is Major Fed, another one we've talked about quite a bit. And maybe he's somewhat similar to Enforceable in his ability. He looks like a horse who has found trouble before, and he's certainly a horse without a lot of speed. But there's a couple of races in there that just make me think, well, maybe he can really get into contention by the time they hit the 3/16 pole.
Yeah, and we talked a lot about Major Fed already, and the reasons that out of the late runners, he's one that we're going to really consider using.
That's right. And he's familiar with Churchill Downs, although his last race at Churchill Downs was not good. Another horse I've heard a lot of people mention as a possible long shot is Sole Volante. Sole Volante, another one without much speed, and another one who's done some good racing, slightly shorter distances. I liked him a little bit in the Belmont, but I didn't like what I saw in the Belmont.
Yeah, that's for sure. Sole Valente made a little bit of a splash in early on in the road to the Kentucky Derby at Tampa for trainer Patrick Biancone, but I don't like what I've seen with his training during the summer, and deep down, I really feel like at some point, Sole Valente is going to get back on the turf where he's going to do his best running.
Yeah, Matt, I think Sole Volante is a horse who wouldn't shock me if he ran a very good race and rallied up into a good position in the Kentucky Derby, but I just don't have quite as much confidence on him a mile and a quarter on the dirt as a couple others here on this list. So for that reason, I probably won't be betting Sole Volante. But if you can draw a line through the Belmont, maybe. The last horse I can't even say maybe about. Dallas Stewart's had some good long shots in the Derby before, good long shot results in the Derby before, but I don't see it with this horse winning Impression.
Yeah, when Dallas Stewart did that with Golden Soul and others, those horses had a little bit of quality in them. They had some noteworthy races in their past performances. Winning Impression just doesn't seem to even be at the level of those past Stewart bombs.
Yeah, Commanding Curve is another one, but Winning Impression just looks like a horse who is living off of maybe past performances from Dallas Stewart more so than his own. I would expect him to be near the back of the pack early and never really make any sort of big dent in the Kentucky Derby. All right, folks, I hope this pace projection helps you. I'm going to predict that we're going to get a nice 23, 46-4, 111 kind of pace with a bunch of horses close to the lead, and that's going to make it a very fair race. Those kind of fractions will give the opportunity for horses to be on or near the lead to do well, not far off the lead to do well, and horses coming from a little farther back to do well. So if we're right, that could be a fair Kentucky Derby. Hopefully all the horses that we play, hopefully all the horses get good, safe trips, but not. But I think, again, this is an important part of handicapping the Derby, is how this 18-horse field or so is running early in the race. Can I get a parting shot from you, my friend?
Yes, and as we said at the opening of the show, Brian and I will be back next week. We're going to have 2 more horse centers next week, so look for them. Of course, we'll have a show that comes out early in the week, and then we'll have a show that comes out after the post position draw, which is happening on Tuesday. We'll run down the field and talk about the horses that we like best to win the race. We'll give our favorite picks and our favorite betting strategies.
That's right, and we've got to talk a little bit Kentucky Oaks. We didn't do any Kentucky Oaks this week, Matt. What's wrong with us? But this was all about the Derby, our top long shots, and our pace projections. I want to thank our great producer there in Louisville, Brett Workman, for helping put together the show every week. Thanks to Brett. Thanks to all you for watching every week. Matt and I sure do appreciate it. And thanks to all the new watchers this week tuning in at Kentucky Derby Time. If you haven't yet hit that red button to subscribe to our YouTube channel on Horse Racing Nation, please do so now. Thanks to our sponsor, the best contest site out there, Derby Wars. That's a lot of thank yous, Matt, but I'm always in that kind of mood. Folks, we'll be back, as Matt said, with a lot more Kentucky Derby, Kentucky Oaks talk right here on HorseCenter. We'll see you then.